Some people wake up feeling clear, steady, and prepared for whatever life places in front of them. Others wake up carrying the same worries, frustrations, and mental noise they went to bed with the night before. The difference is often decided long before the morning begins. While the body rests, the mind continues its work in silence, strengthening certain thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. It does this every night, whether we guide the process consciously or not. The Stoics understood a truth that modern psychology is only beginning to explain in greater detail. The mind is always practicing something. It is either rehearsing fear or cultivating resilience, either feeding anxiety or strengthening wisdom. The final thoughts carried into sleep do not simply disappear when the eyes close. They settle beneath awareness, shaping perception, influencing character, and quietly preparing the emotional state that will greet us the next day. Most people fall asleep carrying unfinished worries, old regrets, imagined problems, and conversations that ended hours ago. Then they wonder why they wake up feeling heavy before the day has even begun. But there is another possibility. The final moments before sleep can become a form of training, a chance to strengthen clarity instead of confusion, perspective instead of worry, and inner stability instead of emotional noise. Stoicism teaches that peace is not found by controlling the world around us, but by learning to guide the world within us. And few moments offer a greater opportunity to do that than the quiet moments before sleep, when the mind is most receptive to what it repeatedly hears. People think of sleep as a pause, a blank space between one day and the next. The Stoics saw it differently. They understood that the final moments before rest are not separate from life. They are deeply connected to the quality of the life that follows. The day may appear finished when the lights go out and the room grows quiet, but the mind does not simply stop working. Something continues beneath awareness. Thoughts settle, emotions linger, impressions remain active. In many ways, tomorrow begins long before morning arrives. This becomes easier to understand when you notice how often the same thoughts return night after night. A difficult conversation, a mistake that still feels unresolved, a fear about a future that has not happened and may never happen. These thoughts rarely appear once and disappear. They return because attention keeps inviting them back. The mind learns through repetition. Whatever receives attention becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar starts to feel important, even when it adds nothing of value. This is why a single thought can influence far more than a single evening. Most people assume that thinking about something repeatedly helps them solve it. Sometimes it does. More often, repetition simply strengthens the emotional weight attached to the thought. The mind begins rehearsing a feeling instead of resolving a problem. Anxiety becomes a habit. Regret becomes a habit. Frustration becomes a habit. After enough repetition, these reactions stop feeling learned. They start feeling natural, even though they were built through countless small moments of attention. The Stoics paid close attention to this process because they understood that character is shaped by what the mind practices consistently. A person does not become calm during a crisis without first practicing calmness in ordinary moments. The same principle works in reverse. A mind that constantly rehearses fear becomes increasingly prepared to find reasons for fear. A mind that repeatedly focuses on what is missing becomes skilled at noticing absence. Training is always happening, whether it is intentional or not. Many people spend their evenings surrounded by noise and then wonder why their minds remain unsettled. The final hour of the day is often filled with distractions, information, stimulation, and endless input. Then silence arrives. Suddenly the mind is left sorting through everything it has absorbed. The problem is not that the mind keeps working. The problem is the material it has been given to work with. A different approach begins with awareness rather than control. The Stoics never suggested that every thought could be eliminated or perfectly managed. They understood that thoughts arise naturally. The important question is whether they are welcomed, repeated, and allowed to take root. There is a difference between noticing a thought and giving it a permanent place to live. One is awareness, the other is attachment. Many struggles become heavier because attachment quietly transforms passing concerns into long-term companions. Once this becomes clear, the atmosphere of an evening begins to change. Instead of treating every worry as a command for immediate attention, it becomes possible to observe it with greater distance. The concern may still exist. The uncertainty may still be present. Yet there is space between the observer and the thought, and within that space, perspective begins to emerge. A problem that felt overwhelming during the day may appear smaller than it first seemed. Emotion loses some of its urgency when it is no longer being constantly reinforced. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That space matters because the mind often exaggerates whatever it repeatedly encounters. A minor setback becomes evidence of failure. A brief criticism becomes a lasting judgment. An uncertain outcome becomes a certainty of disaster. None of these conclusions are inevitable. They grow through repetition. They grow because attention keeps feeding them. The stories repeated internally become the lens through which future experiences are interpreted. Over time, perception begins reflecting practice. This helps explain why two people can experience similar circumstances and respond in completely different ways. One sees only obstacles. The other notices possibilities hidden within the same situation. The difference is not always intelligence, luck, or talent. More often, it is the result of what has been practiced internally for months or even years. The mind develops habits just as surely as the body does. Those habits influence perception long before conscious decisions are made. This is why the final moments of the day deserve more attention than most people give them. They are not magical, but they are influential. They often become the last message delivered to a mind that will continue processing long after conscious awareness fades. Gratitude, reflection, patience, and perspective create one foundation. Resentment, fear, and endless mental argument create another. The mind tends to continue working with whatever material it receives most consistently. This does not mean every evening must become a perfect ritual. Perfection was never the Stoic goal. Progress was. A person can end the day with greater awareness than they began it. That alone changes something important. Instead of drifting into sleep, carrying every burden without examination, it becomes possible to choose what deserves attention and what deserves release. Small choices, repeated consistently, often create the deepest transformations. And if these ideas resonate with you, consider subscribing as a commitment to returning regularly to ideas that sharpen judgment, strengthen character, and bring greater clarity to everyday life. Tomorrow begins earlier than most people realize. It begins in the quiet moments when the day appears finished and nothing dramatic seems to be happening. Beneath that stillness, the mind continues shaping attitudes, reinforcing patterns, and preparing perceptions that will influence the hours ahead. The thoughts repeated most often become familiar companions. Familiar companions become habits. Habits become character. And character, slowly and quietly, becomes the life that unfolds. That realization leads to a question many people would rather avoid. If thoughts shape experience, then who is responsible for the thoughts that are given power? It is easy to blame circumstances. It is easy to point to difficult people, unexpected setbacks, unfair criticism, or disappointments that arrived without warning. Yet when the event itself has passed, something interesting happens. The circumstance leaves, but the mind often keeps replaying it. A brief moment becomes a long conversation. A single comment becomes a daily companion. What was once a small part of reality begins taking up a much larger space within perception. The event may have lasted minutes, but the reaction can continue for weeks, months, or even years. Most people believe they are thinking about a problem because they are trying to solve it. Sometimes that is true. More often, the mind is simply circling familiar ground. It revisits the same scene, repeats the same interpretation, and arrives at the same conclusion. The repetition creates an illusion of progress, but nothing actually changes. The situation remains in the past while attention remains attached to it in the present. This is one of the reasons emotional burdens can feel so heavy. They are carried long after their original purpose has disappeared. What began as a reaction becomes a habit, and habits have a way of disguising themselves as necessities. The Stoics paid close attention to this tendency because they understood how easily the mind can become occupied by things beyond its influence. A person receives criticism and spends days replaying it. A plan fails and becomes evidence that future plans will fail as well. An opportunity disappears and suddenly every thought is focused on what might have been. None of these reactions are unusual. They are deeply human. Yet the Stoics recognized that suffering often grows not from the event itself, but from the story constructed around it. The story gains strength every time it is repeated. Eventually it begins to feel like reality rather than interpretation. This is where awareness becomes important. Not because awareness instantly removes discomfort, but because it reveals what is actually happening. Many people assume they are trapped by circumstances when they are really trapped by repetition. The same thought appears so frequently that it starts feeling permanent. The same fear returns so often that it begins to seem justified simply because it is familiar. Familiarity can be deceptive. The mind tends to trust what it encounters repeatedly, even when that repetition serves no useful purpose. A thought does not become true because it returns every day. Consider how much mental energy is spent arguing with the past, a conversation that cannot be changed, a mistake that cannot be undone, a decision that belongs to another version of yourself. The mind revisits these moments as though one more review will finally produce a different outcome. Yet the outcome never changes. Only the emotional attachment remains active. The Stoics encouraged a different response. Instead of asking how the past could have been different, they focused on how the present could be used wisely. Their attention moved toward action rather than endless reflection. They understood that growth requires learning from experience, but learning is not the same thing as reliving. As this distinction becomes clearer, another pattern begins to reveal itself. Many of the thoughts that create the most distress are connected to things outside direct control. Other people's opinions, future outcomes, unpredictable events. The mind often treats uncertainty as a problem that must be solved immediately. It searches for guarantees where none exist. It demands certainty from a world that has never promised it. The result is constant tension. Not because life is always difficult, but because the mind is constantly negotiating with realities it cannot command. This quiet struggle consumes attention without producing peace. There is a certain freedom that appears when this habit is recognized. Not freedom from challenges, disappointments, or uncertainty. Freedom from unnecessary attachment to them. A criticism can be examined without becoming an identity. A setback can be acknowledged without becoming a prediction about the future. A difficult experience can be remembered without becoming a permanent emotional residence. This shift may seem small, yet it changes the relationship between thought and attention. Instead of automatically following every mental impulse, it becomes possible to pause and observe it. That pause creates room for perspective. Perspective often arrives quietly. It rarely appears through dramatic breakthroughs. More often, it emerges through repeated moments of observation. A thought arises, and instead of immediately believing it, it is examined. An emotion appears, and instead of being obeyed without question, it is understood. As Epictetus reminded his students, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This process strengthens something that many people overlook. It strengthens the ability to choose where attention goes. The mind may produce countless thoughts throughout the day, But not every thought deserves equal consideration. Some deserve action. Others deserve understanding. Many deserve neither. They simply need to pass through without being invited to stay. This becomes especially important as the day draws to a close. The thoughts carried into the evening often reveal what has been occupying the mind most consistently. If resentment has been rehearsed all day, it is likely to appear again before sleep. If anxiety has been fed repeatedly, it will often ask for attention one more time. The mind continues working with whatever material it has been given. That is why awareness matters so much. It allows a person to notice what is being carried before it becomes another burden taken into tomorrow. The real challenge, then, is not defeating every difficult thought. It is refusing to give endless resonance to thoughts that no longer serve a purpose. The world moves forward. Circumstances change. Days pass. Yet many people remain attached to experiences that are already over. The Stoics understood that peace begins when attention stops treating every passing event as something that must be carried forever. Life becomes lighter when the mind learns the difference between remembering and holding on. And often the most important victory is not over the world outside, but over the habit of continuing a battle long after the event itself has ended. The mind has a remarkable ability to keep old experiences alive long after they have ended. A conversation from years ago can suddenly return with perfect clarity. An awkward moment can still create discomfort despite the fact that everyone else involved has likely forgotten it. A decision made in another season of life can continue influencing emotions as though it happened yesterday. The event itself is gone. The people may have changed, circumstances may be completely different, yet the memory remains active because attention continues feeding it, giving energy to something that no longer exists anywhere except within thought. This habit often feels natural because the mind believes it is protecting us. It revisits old pain in an attempt to prevent future pain. It reviews mistakes in the hope of avoiding new mistakes. It replays disappointments because it assumes there is still something left to solve. Sometimes there is value in reflection. Growth depends on learning. Wisdom depends on honest evaluation. But there is an important difference between learning from an experience and living inside it. One creates understanding. The other creates stagnation. When reflection turns into endless repetition, the past begins occupying space that belongs to the present. Marcus Aurelius understood this tension well. As a ruler, he carried immense responsibility, constant pressure, and countless reasons to become overwhelmed by regret or frustration. Yet he repeatedly reminded himself that events are not always the source of suffering. The judgments attached to those events often create a second layer of pain that lasts much longer than the original experience. A mistake occurs. Then comes the judgment that the mistake defines who you are. A disappointment arrives. Then comes the judgment that life should have unfolded differently. The event passes quickly. The judgment remains, sometimes for years. That lingering judgment can quietly shape perception without being noticed. A person who was rejected once may begin expecting rejection everywhere. Someone who failed in one situation may start approaching future opportunities with hesitation. The original event becomes a lens. Everything that follows is interpreted through it. This is why old wounds are rarely just memories. They become frameworks that influence decisions, expectations, and emotional reactions. The mind is not simply remembering the past. It is using the past to predict the future. The challenge is that these predictions are often incomplete. They are built from moments rather than the whole picture. A difficult experience becomes evidence that similar experiences will end the same way. One chapter becomes the entire story. Yet life rarely works like that. People grow, circumstances change, understanding deepens. What was true years ago may no longer be true now. Still, the mind tends to hold tightly to familiar conclusions because familiarity feels safe even when it limits growth. This becomes especially noticeable during quiet moments. Throughout the day, there are distractions, responsibilities, and conversations competing for attention. At night, much of that noise fades away. The mind finally has room to reveal what it has been carrying beneath the surface. Old memories often return during these hours because they have never been fully examined. They linger in the background, waiting for attention. Many people assume the answer is to push them away, but resistance often strengthens what it tries to eliminate. A different approach begins with observation. Observation creates distance. Instead of immediately becoming absorbed in a memory, it becomes possible to look at it with curiosity. The event remains the same, but the relationship to it changes. Rather than asking why it happened, attention shifts toward understanding why it still holds power. That question often reveals something important. The memory itself is not causing the suffering. The meaning attached to it is. Once that becomes clear, space begins to open. The grip of the past starts loosening. This is where an evening practice can become surprisingly powerful. Before sleep, there is an opportunity to notice which stories are being repeated most often. Some of them may still offer useful lessons. Others may simply be old narratives continuing out of habit. Not every thought deserves equal attention. Not every memory deserves permanent residence. By questioning whether a story still serves a purpose, the mind gradually learns to separate wisdom from attachment. One can remain, the other can be released. That release is not denial. It is not pretending the past never happened. Stoic thought never encouraged avoidance. It encouraged clarity. The goal is to see experiences accurately rather than through layers of emotional distortion. As Seneca observed, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. A painful moment can be acknowledged without becoming an identity. A mistake can be remembered without becoming a lifelong sentence. An old disappointment can be recognized without allowing it to define what is possible next. Freedom often begins with this simple distinction. As the day comes to an end, the stories carried into sleep matter more than most people realize. The mind continues working with whatever it receives repeatedly. If old wounds are constantly rehearsed, they remain active. If they are examined with honesty and perspective, they begin losing their influence. Little by little, attention returns to the present instead of remaining trapped in what can no longer be changed. That shift may seem small, yet it changes the quality of thought, the direction of emotion, and eventually the way life is experienced. The past cannot be rewritten, but the relationship to it can. Sometimes that single realization is enough to create a level of peace that years of rumination never could. And with that peace comes greater presence, wiser choices, steadier attention, and genuine forward movement today. The Stoics understood something that remains difficult to accept even now. Much of the suffering people experience does not come from reality itself, but from the ongoing struggle against reality. There is pain in life. There are disappointments, losses, uncertainties, and unexpected changes. None of these can be completely avoided. Yet alongside those unavoidable experiences, many people create a second layer of suffering by demanding that events be different from what they are. The mind argues with circumstances. It replays situations that cannot be altered. It insists that life should have followed a different path. That resistance may feel justified, but it often becomes the very thing that prevents peace from emerging. This habit develops so gradually that it often goes unnoticed. A plan fails, and instead of adapting, the mind becomes trapped in frustration. An uncertain situation appears, and instead of accepting the limits of control, the mind searches endlessly for guarantees. A difficult emotion surfaces, and instead of observing it, the mind immediately tries to eliminate it. What begins as a natural reaction slowly becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes familiar. Eventually, the struggle feels normal. Many people spend years fighting battles that no longer require fighting simply because they have become accustomed to resistance. The strange thing is that resistance often disguises itself as responsibility. It convinces people that constant worry is a form of preparation. It suggests that replaying mistakes is a form of learning. It argues that refusing to let go demonstrates strength or seriousness, yet the results tell a different story. Endless worry rarely creates clarity. Constant mental replay rarely creates wisdom. Refusing to release old frustrations rarely creates freedom. Instead, these habits consume attention and drain energy, leaving the mind exhausted before the day has even fully begun. This exhaustion follows many people into the night. The body may be tired enough to sleep, but the mind remains active, continuing conversations that ended long ago and attempting to solve problems that have no immediate solution. Thoughts move in circles. The same concerns appear again and again. Hours pass. Rest becomes difficult, not because the mind is incapable of quiet, but because it has spent so much time practicing agitation. Whatever is rehearsed repeatedly becomes easier to repeat. A restless mind often reflects a restless pattern rather than a restless reality. The Stoics approached this differently. They recognized that not every thought deserved engagement. Not every concern required immediate action. Not every emotional impulse contained useful guidance. This did not mean ignoring problems or pretending difficulties did not exist. It meant developing the ability to distinguish between what required attention and what merely demanded it. There is an important difference. Many thoughts demand attention through urgency, fear, or repetition. Few actually deserve the amount of energy they receive. Learning this distinction creates a subtle shift. The mind no longer treats every internal signal as an emergency. A worry may appear, but it does not automatically become the center of attention. A fear may arise, but it does not immediately dictate behavior. An uncomfortable emotion may be present, yet it is allowed to exist without taking control. This ability develops slowly. It is not a dramatic transformation. It grows through repeated moments of observation, each one strengthening the space between awareness and reaction. Within that space, something valuable begins to emerge. Perspective returns. Problems can be viewed more clearly because they are no longer magnified by constant emotional resistance. A challenge remains a challenge, but it no longer becomes evidence that everything is falling apart. An uncertain future remains uncertain, but it no longer demands endless prediction. Reality becomes easier to face when it is seen directly, rather than through layers of fear, frustration, or attachment. This is one reason the moments before sleep matter so much. As the noise of the day begins to fade, whatever has been carried internally becomes easier to notice. The mind reveals what it has been holding on to. Sometimes it is a disappointment, sometimes it is anger, sometimes it is anxiety about a future that has not arrived. These experiences often persist because they have been met with resistance rather than understanding. The mind keeps returning to them because it believes something remains unfinished. Yet not everything unfinished requires completion before rest. Some things require acceptance. Some require patience. Some require nothing more than the recognition that they cannot be solved in the present moment. This recognition is not surrender, it is wisdom. The Stoics repeatedly emphasized that peace comes from directing effort toward what can be influenced and releasing the need to control what cannot. When that principle is applied consistently, mental tension begins to loosen. A person does not need to solve every problem before closing their eyes. They do not need certainty about tomorrow. They do not need complete emotional comfort. What they need is the willingness to stop carrying unnecessary weight. The mind can set things down, even temporarily. It can acknowledge uncertainty without becoming consumed by it. It can recognize a difficult emotion without obeying every instruction that emotion provides. As this becomes a habit, rest begins to feel different. Sleep is no longer an escape from mental struggle. It becomes recovery. The mind no longer enters the night in the middle of a battle. It enters with greater clarity, greater perspective, and a quieter relationship with the things it cannot immediately change. Nothing outside may have changed at all. The circumstances may remain exactly the same. Yet the experience of those circumstances becomes lighter, because resistance is no longer adding unnecessary weight. And often that is where genuine peace begins, not when life finally becomes perfect, but when the mind learns that it does not need to fight every moment of reality in order to be at ease. Life feels different when the mind becomes quiet, not because every difficulty has been solved, and not because the world has suddenly become more predictable, but because attention is no longer being pulled in every direction by every passing disturbance. Most people spend so much time reacting that they rarely experience what it feels like to simply observe. A problem appears and immediately captures the mind. A criticism arrives and follows them for hours. An unexpected challenge enters the day and becomes the center of every thought. The mind moves from one concern to another without rest, carrying each one as though it must be solved immediately. Over time, this constant mental activity begins to feel normal, even though it quietly drains energy from every part of life. The Stoics recognize that external events have a strange power over people, not because those events are inherently powerful, but because people often surrender their attention to them without realizing it. A minor inconvenience becomes a source of irritation for an entire day. A disappointing outcome becomes evidence that something is wrong with the future. A difficult conversation continues long after it has ended because the mind keeps replaying it. The event itself may be brief, yet the internal reaction extends far beyond the original moment. In this way, people often suffer more from their continued engagement with an experience than from the experience itself. This understanding reveals something important. The weight carried from day to day is not always created by circumstances. Much of it comes from the habit of giving constant attention to what disturbs us. Attention is powerful. Whatever receives it grows larger in awareness. A small concern becomes significant when examined repeatedly. A temporary frustration becomes a lasting emotional state when it is rehearsed again and again. The mind naturally moves toward what it focuses on most, and over time that focus begins shaping perception itself. That is why inner quiet is so valuable. It creates distance between the observer and the disturbance. The challenge remains present, but it no longer dominates every thought. A problem can exist without becoming an identity. An uncertainty can exist without becoming a source of endless fear. A setback can exist without becoming a prediction about the future. This distinction may seem simple, yet it changes the way experiences are carried. Instead of absorbing every difficulty and allowing it to settle deep within the mind, it becomes possible to acknowledge it, learn from it, and continue forward without unnecessary attachment. Many people assume peace will arrive when circumstances improve. They tell themselves that calmness will come after the problem is solved, after the uncertainty disappears, after life becomes more manageable. Yet life rarely remains still for very long. One challenge is replaced by another. One responsibility gives way to the next. If peace depends entirely on external conditions, it will always remain fragile. The Stoics understood that a more reliable form of stability comes from learning how to relate to circumstances differently rather than waiting for circumstances to become perfect. This does not mean becoming indifferent or emotionally disconnected. It means developing the ability to remain steady while life continues unfolding. Consider a storm outside a window. The wind may be strong, the rain may be relentless. Yet, the storm remains outside unless it is invited in. Many people unknowingly bring every storm into their inner world. They carry frustrations from work into the evening. They carry worries about tomorrow into the night. They carry conflicts from the past into moments that could otherwise be peaceful. By the time they lie down to sleep, they are carrying far more than the day itself. The mind was never designed to carry every burden indefinitely. It requires moments of release. It requires space. Without that space, thoughts begin piling on top of one another until everything feels heavier than it truly is. This is why the quiet moments before sleep deserve attention. During those moments, distractions begin fading. The responsibilities of the day lose some of their urgency. What remains is often a clear picture of what has been occupying the mind most consistently. The thoughts that appear during those quiet moments reveal what has been rehearsed throughout the day. For many people, those thoughts revolve around problems that cannot be solved in the present moment. The mind keeps working because it believes constant thinking will eventually create certainty. Yet certainty rarely arrives through endless mental effort. More often, clarity emerges when the mind stops struggling long enough to see things as they are. A concern may still exist tomorrow. An unanswered question may still remain. But carrying it through every waking and sleeping moment rarely improves the outcome. There is strength in recognizing this, not the strength of control, but the strength of perspective. The ability to notice a disturbance without becoming consumed by it is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. It prevents small difficulties from becoming large ones. It prevents temporary emotions from becoming permanent states. Most importantly, it allows the mind to recover instead of remaining locked in constant reaction. As night approaches, this understanding becomes increasingly important. The emotional weight felt in the morning is often connected to what was carried into sleep the night before. A mind filled with resentment tends to wake up searching for more reasons to feel resentful. A mind filled with anxiety often wakes up prepared to continue worrying. The patterns continue because they have been reinforced repeatedly, yet the opposite is also true. A mind that learns to release what is unnecessary begins creating a different experience entirely. Nothing magical happens overnight. The challenges of life do not disappear. Responsibilities remain. Uncertainty remains. The world continues changing in ways that cannot always be predicted or controlled. Yet something within begins to change. The need to absorb every disturbance starts fading. Attention becomes more deliberate. Thoughts become less reactive. The mind gradually learns that not everything deserves a permanent place within it. And in that realization, a quieter and more balanced way of living begins to emerge, one evening, one reflection, and one moment of awareness at a time. Night has a way of revealing things that the day allows us to ignore. During daylight hours, attention is constantly being pulled outward. There is always something demanding a response. A message arrives, a task appears, a conversation begins. One responsibility leads directly into another. The mind stays occupied, moving from one thing to the next, rarely stopping long enough to notice what is happening beneath the surface. Activity creates a kind of distance from ourselves. As long as there is something to do, there is often no need to sit with what we feel, what we fear, or what we have been carrying. Then evening arrives. The noise begins to fade. The demands of the day loosen their grip. What remains is often something many people spend their entire day avoiding: their own thoughts. This is one reason nighttime feels so different. It removes many of the distractions that compete for attention. The external world becomes quieter, and the internal world becomes easier to hear. For some, this feels peaceful. For others, it feels uncomfortable. Thoughts that remained hidden beneath activity begin to surface. Old worries return. Unresolved emotions ask for attention. Questions that were pushed aside during the day suddenly seem impossible to ignore. The silence itself is not the source of discomfort. The silence simply exposes what was already there. Many people respond to this discomfort by searching for another distraction. They reach for entertainment, endless scrolling, background noise, or anything that keeps the mind occupied. There is nothing wrong with rest or enjoyment, but constant distraction can become a habit. When every quiet moment is filled immediately, there is little opportunity to understand what is happening internally. The mind continues carrying the same burdens because it never has the chance to examine them clearly. Avoidance creates temporary relief, but temporary relief is not the same as peace. The Stoics viewed these quiet hours differently. They did not see solitude as something to fear. They saw it as an opportunity. When external noise decreases, observation becomes easier. Patterns become visible. Reactions become visible. The stories repeated throughout the day become visible. This kind of observation was not meant to produce self-criticism. It was meant to produce understanding. There is an important difference. Criticism often creates resistance. Understanding creates clarity. One pushes against reality, the other learns from it. This is why honest reflection played such an important role in Stoic practice. The goal was never to become obsessed with personal flaws or spend hours analyzing every mistake. The goal was to see clearly what influenced today's decisions, what emotions shaped behavior, what thoughts received the most attention. These questions were not intended to create guilt. They were intended to create awareness. Without awareness, patterns continue unnoticed. With awareness, change becomes possible. Something interesting happens when a person begins observing the mind without immediately reacting to everything it produces. Thoughts lose some of their authority. A worry can be noticed without becoming a prediction. A memory can appear without becoming a source of suffering. An emotion can be present without taking complete control. This does not happen overnight. It develops gradually through practice. The more often observation replaces automatic reaction, the stronger this ability becomes. Nighttime offers a unique environment for this practice because there are fewer competing influences. The mind is no longer overwhelmed by conversations, obligations, and constant stimulation. It becomes easier to notice where attention naturally goes when left alone. This can be revealing. Some people discover that much of their mental energy is spent on things they cannot control. Others notice how often they replay the same concerns. Some realize they are carrying emotional weight that no longer serves a purpose. These realizations are valuable because they reveal what has been shaping experience behind the scenes. The temptation is to judge whatever is discovered. Many people assume that noticing fear, frustration, insecurity, or uncertainty means something is wrong. The Stoics would argue otherwise. Noticing is not failure. Noticing is progress. A pattern cannot be changed while it remains invisible. The simple act of becoming aware of a habit is often the first step toward loosening its influence. The mind becomes easier to guide when its movements are understood. Over time, solitude begins to feel different. What once seemed uncomfortable becomes useful. The quiet is no longer an empty space that must be filled immediately. It becomes a place where understanding can deepen. Reflection becomes less about fixing every problem and more about seeing things accurately. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Many concerns lose their intensity when viewed clearly. Many fears lose their power when examined honestly. What seemed overwhelming during the day often appears more manageable in the calm of evening. As the night continues and the world grows still, there is an opportunity hidden within that stillness. Not an opportunity to solve every problem before sleep or achieve perfect peace before morning. Something simpler than that. An opportunity to listen, to observe, to understand what has been occupying the mind and influencing the direction of thought. The distractions fade, and what remains offers valuable insight. In those quiet moments, a person often learns more about themselves than they do during an entire day filled with activity. And that understanding, carried consistently from one evening to the next, can quietly reshape the way life is experienced long before the next sunrise arrives. Understanding yourself requires a kind of courage that is rarely discussed. Most people think courage appears in dramatic moments during major decisions, difficult conversations, or visible challenges. Yet some of the most important acts of courage happen in complete silence. They happen when there is no audience, no recognition, and no immediate reward. They happen when a person becomes willing to look honestly at what is taking place within their own mind. This sounds simple, but it is often uncomfortable because the mind does not only reveal strengths, it reveals habits, fears, attachments, and motivations that are much easier to overlook when life is busy and attention is scattered. During the day, it is surprisingly easy to avoid these things. There is always another task to complete, another responsibility to handle, another distraction waiting to fill the empty spaces. Activity creates movement, and movement can create the illusion of progress. Yet beneath that constant motion, certain patterns continue operating quietly. A fear may influence decisions without ever announcing itself. A resentment may shape reactions without being fully acknowledged. A need for approval may guide choices while disguising itself as responsibility, kindness, or ambition. The influence remains active even when it goes unnoticed. This is why moments of reflection can feel so revealing. When external distractions begin to fade, the mind has fewer places to hide. Thoughts that remained buried beneath activity begin to surface. Emotions that were ignored throughout the day become more visible. Certain questions become harder to avoid. The experience is not always pleasant. In fact, many people spend years avoiding this kind of honesty because they fear what they might discover. Yet avoiding a truth does not reduce its influence. It simply allows that influence to operate without being questioned. The Stoics understood this well. They believed that self-awareness was essential because no meaningful improvement could occur without it. A person cannot change a habit they refuse to see. They cannot correct a pattern they do not recognize. They cannot free themselves from an unhealthy attachment while pretending it does not exist. Growth begins with observation. Before anything can be improved, it must first be understood. This is one reason Stoic thinkers spent so much time examining their own reactions, choices, and motivations. They recognized that the greatest obstacles are often internal, long before they become external. Sometimes the truths that emerge are surprisingly simple. A person may realize they are carrying anger towards someone who no longer plays any role in their life. They may discover that a fear of failure has been quietly limiting opportunities. They may notice that many of their decisions are driven by the desire to be accepted rather than the desire to live according to their values. These realizations can create discomfort because they challenge familiar stories. The mind prefers certainty, even when that certainty is based on unhealthy patterns. Questioning those patterns requires stepping into unfamiliar territory. Yet there is something liberating about seeing clearly. The moment a pattern becomes visible, it loses some of its power. What was once operating automatically can now be examined consciously. Instead of being carried along by habit, a person gains the opportunity to pause and ask whether that habit still deserves a place in their life. This pause is more significant than it first appears. It creates a separation between awareness and automatic reaction. Within that separation, new possibilities begin to emerge. Consider how often people act from fear without realizing it. Fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of uncertainty, fear of making the wrong choice. These fears rarely announce themselves directly. Instead, they disguise themselves as caution, hesitation, or endless preparation. A person may spend years convincing themselves they are waiting for the perfect moment when, in reality, they are waiting for the fear to disappear. The problem is that fear rarely disappears on its own. It loses influence when it is recognized, understood, and placed in its proper perspective. The same is true of resentment. Many people carry old frustrations for far longer than they realize. They replay certain experiences, revisit certain memories, and continue arguing with situations that have already ended. The resentment becomes familiar. Familiarity makes it feel justified. Yet when examined honestly, it often becomes clear that the burden is no longer serving a useful purpose. The original event may be long gone, but the emotional attachment remains active because it has never been questioned deeply enough. This process of questioning is not about self-criticism. The Stoics did not advocate harsh judgment toward oneself. Their approach was rooted in understanding. They believed that people make poor decisions when guided by confusion, emotion, or incomplete understanding. The goal was not to condemn those mistakes, but to learn from them. A person who understands their own patterns gains the ability to respond differently in the future. Without understanding, the same reactions tend to repeat themselves again and again. As evening approaches and the pace of life begins to slow, these insights become especially valuable. The quiet hours provide an opportunity to notice what has been influencing thoughts throughout the day. What emotions appeared most often? What concerns demanded the most attention? What assumptions shaped decisions? The answers are not always comfortable, but comfort is not the purpose of reflection. Clarity is, and clarity has a way of changing things. The hidden cannot be challenged while it remains hidden. The unseen cannot be examined while it remains unseen. The moment awareness reaches a pattern, that pattern becomes something other than destiny. It becomes a choice. Perhaps not an easy choice, and certainly not one that changes overnight, but a choice nonetheless. This is where genuine transformation begins, not with dramatic breakthroughs or sudden revelations, but with the quiet willingness to see things as they are. The mind becomes easier to guide when it is understood. The future becomes easier to shape when the present is viewed honestly. And often the first step toward becoming wiser is simply becoming willing to look inward without turning away. Reflection is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word and immediately think of criticism. They imagine replaying every mistake, examining every weakness, and judging themselves for every moment that failed to meet their expectations. Because of this, what should be a useful practice becomes an exhausting one. They spend hours thinking about themselves, yet gain very little understanding. They leave the experience feeling heavier rather than wiser. The problem is not reflection itself. The problem is the way it is approached. There is a profound difference between observing yourself and attacking yourself. One creates awareness. The other creates resistance. One opens the door to growth. The other keeps a person trapped in the same cycle they are trying to escape. The Stoics recognized this distinction clearly. They understood that no person could improve without first understanding themselves, but they also understood that understanding requires honesty rather than judgment. When they reflected on their actions, they were not searching for reasons to feel ashamed. They were searching for lessons. They approached their own behavior with the same mindset a skilled craftsman brings to their work. If something was imperfect, the goal was not self-punishment. The goal was improvement. Every mistake became information. Every setback became instruction. Every failure became an opportunity to see something more clearly than before. This way of thinking changes the entire experience of self-examination. Instead of asking what is wrong with you, attention shifts toward understanding what happened and why. That may sound like a small difference, but it changes everything. One question assumes there is something fundamentally flawed that needs fixing. The other assumes there is something valuable to learn. One leads toward shame, the other leads toward wisdom. Shame tends to close the mind, wisdom tends to open it. When people become consumed by self-criticism, they often stop learning because all of their energy is directed toward defending themselves from their own judgments. Consider how often mistakes are treated as personal verdicts. A person makes a poor decision and immediately concludes that they are incapable. They fail at something important and decide they are a failure. They fall short of their expectations and begin questioning their worth. The original mistake may have lasted only a moment, but the judgment attached to it can remain for years. This is one reason so many people carry unnecessary emotional weight. They are not suffering only from what happened. They are suffering from the story they created about what happened. The Stoics challenged these stories because they understood that events and interpretations are not the same thing. A mistake can mean many things. It can mean a lesson was needed. It can mean experience was lacking. It can mean a decision was made without enough information. It can even mean growth is already taking place. Yet people often choose the harshest interpretation available. They assume the mistake reveals something permanent about who they are. Reflection invites a different perspective. It encourages curiosity instead of condemnation. Rather than asking why a failure occurred in order to assign blame, it asks what can be learned in order to improve future actions. This shift creates a completely different relationship with personal growth. The value of this approach becomes even clearer during quiet moments. As the day begins to slow and distractions become less demanding, there is an opportunity to look back without becoming trapped by regret. Many people use these moments to replay everything they wish they had done differently. They revisit conversations, decisions, and missed opportunities. Yet very little changes because the process is driven by emotion rather than understanding. Reflection, when practiced properly, does not keep a person stuck in the past. It helps them extract wisdom from the past and carry that wisdom forward. This requires patience because the mind naturally gravitates toward judgment. It often wants quick conclusions. It wants to label experiences as good or bad, success or failure, victory or defeat. Reflection asks for something more thoughtful. It asks for observation before evaluation. It asks for understanding before reaction. When this habit develops, experiences begin revealing lessons that would otherwise remain hidden. A difficult interaction may expose an emotional trigger. A poor decision may reveal an assumption that needs to be challenged. A recurring frustration may point toward a habit that has gone unnoticed. These discoveries are only possible when observation remains honest and calm. The Stoics believed that awareness itself possesses transformative power. Once a pattern becomes visible, it can no longer operate entirely in the shadows. As Carl Jung famously wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." A person who recognizes their tendency toward impatience gains the ability to pause before reacting. A person who notices their need for approval gains the ability to question whether that need should continue directing their choices. Awareness does not instantly solve every problem, but it creates the possibility of change. Without awareness, patterns repeat automatically. With awareness, they become choices. This is why consistent reflection mattered so much. Not because every day required deep analysis, but because regular observation prevents small habits from becoming permanent limitations. A person who reflects honestly begins noticing trends before they become deeply rooted. They recognize where attention is being wasted. They recognize where emotions are influencing judgment. They recognize where their actions align with their values and where they fall short. None of this requires harshness. In fact, harshness often interferes with the process. Growth tends to happen more effectively when understanding leads the way. As evening approaches and the mind begins settling from the activity of the day, there is a unique opportunity hidden within that quietness. It is an opportunity to step back and observe without accusation, to notice without condemning, to learn without becoming consumed by guilt. The purpose is not to create a perfect version of yourself overnight. The purpose is to understand yourself a little more clearly than you did yesterday. Small insights accumulate, small adjustments compound. Over time, those small moments of honest observation become something far greater. They become wisdom, and wisdom begins not with knowing everything about yourself, but with being willing to look at yourself clearly enough to keep learning. There is a quiet shift that occurs when mistakes are no longer viewed as evidence of failure, but as opportunities for understanding. Most people end their days carrying a mental record of everything that went wrong. They replay awkward conversations, missed opportunities, poor decisions, and moments when they failed to live up to their own expectations. The mind returns to these experiences again and again, not because it is learning from them, but because it is judging them. The same scenes repeat with the same emotions attached. Regret grows stronger, frustration grows stronger, yet very little wisdom is gained. The experience becomes an emotional burden rather than a source of insight. This is where a different approach begins to reveal its value. The Stoics believed that every experience contains something worth learning, even the experiences people would prefer to forget. They understood that life itself is a teacher, but its lessons are often missed because people focus too heavily on their discomfort and too little on their understanding. A mistake can become a source of shame, or it can become a source of wisdom. The event remains the same. The difference lies in how it is examined. One path keeps attention trapped in self-criticism. The other transforms the experience into something useful. This transformation does not happen automatically. It requires a willingness to look honestly at what occurred without immediately condemning yourself for it. Consider how different the end of a day feels when curiosity replaces judgment. Instead of asking why you failed, you begin asking what happened. Instead of focusing on blame, you focus on understanding. A difficult interaction becomes an opportunity to notice an emotional trigger. A poor decision becomes an opportunity to identify a weakness in your thinking. A moment of impatience becomes an opportunity to understand what was happening beneath the reaction. These observations may seem small, but they change the relationship between experience and growth. The mind stops treating mistakes as permanent labels and starts treating them as information. This perspective creates space for honesty. Many people avoid examining their behavior because they fear what they might discover. They worry that looking closely will confirm their worst beliefs about themselves, yet avoidance rarely creates improvement. Ignoring a pattern does not weaken it. Ignoring a habit does not remove its influence. In many cases, the opposite happens. The pattern continues operating unnoticed, shaping decisions and reactions without being challenged. The Stoics recognized that awareness is not something to fear. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. Once something becomes visible, it can be understood. Once it is understood, it can be changed. There is also a deeper reason this practice matters. Every day leaves an impression on the mind. Experiences accumulate. Reactions accumulate. Decisions accumulate. Without reflection, these impressions settle into habits without ever being questioned. A person may become increasingly impatient without noticing it. They may become increasingly fearful, increasingly resentful, or increasingly dependent on external approval without realizing how much influence these tendencies have gained. Reflection interrupts this process. It creates a moment of examination before habits become deeply rooted. It allows a person to remain conscious of the direction in which they are moving. The questions themselves are often simple. What did today teach me? Where did I respond well? Where did I allow emotion to take control? Where did I act in a way that aligned with my values? And where did I fall short? These questions are powerful, not because they produce immediate answers, but because they encourage honest observation. They shift attention away from judgment and toward understanding. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Perfection creates pressure. Awareness creates growth. This distinction becomes especially important during quiet moments before sleep. The day has ended. The distractions have faded. There is no longer any need to react, perform, or solve problems immediately. What remains is an opportunity to look back with clarity. Many people spend these moments replaying their frustrations. They relive what went wrong and strengthen the emotional charge attached to those memories. Reflection offers another possibility. Instead of reliving the experience, you examine it. Instead of feeding the emotion, you search for the lesson. The difference may seem subtle, yet it changes the entire experience. Over time, this habit begins reshaping the way challenges are perceived. Difficult experiences lose some of their ability to intimidate because they are no longer viewed as purely negative. Every setback contains information. Every disappointment reveals something. Every mistake highlights an area that can be strengthened. This does not mean pain suddenly becomes pleasant or that failure becomes enjoyable. It means experiences stop being wasted. Even the hardest moments begin contributing to growth because they are approached with the intention to learn rather than the desire to escape. The Stoics understood that wisdom is rarely found in comfort alone. Wisdom emerges through engagement with life. It develops through observation, reflection, and the willingness to learn from experience. A person who examines their life honestly gains access to lessons that remain invisible to those who move from one day to the next without reflection. The experiences are available to everyone, but the lessons are not. The lessons belong to those who are willing to pause long enough to notice them. As evening turns into night, this practice becomes more than an exercise in self-improvement. It becomes a way of relating to life itself. Each day becomes a source of instruction. Each challenge becomes a teacher. Each mistake becomes an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply. The mind no longer carries failures as evidence of inadequacy. It carries them as evidence of learning. That shift changes more than the way a person thinks about the past. It changes the way they approach the future. And when that future arrives, it is met not by someone weighed down by regret, but by someone steadily becoming wiser through the simple act of paying attention. One of the most overlooked sources of exhaustion has very little to do with physical effort. People often assume they are tired because they worked too much, slept too little, or carried too many responsibilities throughout the day. Sometimes those things are certainly true. Yet there are many occasions when the body receives enough rest, the workload remains manageable, and still a strange heaviness follows into the morning. The mind feels crowded, attention feels scattered, motivation feels distant. It can be difficult to explain because nothing obvious seems wrong. Yet beneath the surface, something else may be happening. Energy is being consumed by things that no longer belong in the present moment. The mind was never meant to carry an endless collection of unfinished emotional burdens. Yet many people do exactly that. Old disappointments remain active long after the circumstances have changed. Past mistakes continue demanding attention years after their lessons have already been learned. Fears about the future occupy space, despite having no clear connection to reality. Comparisons quietly shape self-worth. Unanswered questions continue searching for certainty where certainty cannot be found. Each individual concern may seem small, but together they create a kind of emotional clutter that fills the mind from morning until night. What makes this clutter particularly draining is that it often operates in the background. A person may not spend every moment consciously thinking about an old fear or unresolved frustration, yet the influence remains present. It colors perception. It shapes expectations. It affects emotional reactions. Much like carrying extra weight in a backpack, the burden may not be noticed constantly, but it affects every step. The longer it is carried, the more normal it begins to feel. Eventually, people forget what it feels like to move without it. The Stoics paid close attention to this tendency because they understood how easily attention becomes trapped by things that offer little value in return. They recognized that much of human suffering comes not from what is happening now, but from what the mind continues dragging forward from yesterday or projecting into tomorrow. A person can be sitting in complete safety while feeling overwhelmed by imagined futures. They can be surrounded by opportunity while remaining trapped in old disappointments. The present moment becomes crowded by experiences that are no longer occurring, but continue influencing thought as though they are. This is one reason emotional exhaustion can feel so confusing. Physical fatigue usually has a clear cause. The body has worked hard and requires recovery. Mental fatigue is often less obvious. It accumulates quietly through repeated thinking. The same worries return, the same fears repeat, the same frustrations demand attention. Day after day, the mind invests energy in concerns that cannot be solved through repetition alone. The effort feels productive because thinking creates the impression of action. Yet endless thinking and meaningful progress are not the same thing. Many people spend enormous amounts of energy mentally carrying situations that no longer require carrying. As evening approaches, this burden often becomes easier to notice. The distractions of the day begin fading, conversations end, responsibilities pause. The mind is left with itself. What emerges during these quiet moments often reveals what has been occupying attention beneath the surface all along. For some, it is anxiety about an uncertain future. For others, it is regret tied to the past. Sometimes it is resentment, comparison, self-doubt, or a constant need to control outcomes that cannot be controlled. Whatever form it takes, the pattern remains similar. Attention is being consumed by something that is not helping the present moment. The challenge is that many people mistake carrying something for solving it. They assume that continuing to think about a problem demonstrates responsibility. They believe that releasing a concern means becoming careless. Yet there is a significant difference between addressing something and endlessly carrying it. A problem may deserve attention. It does not necessarily deserve permanent residence within the mind. Wisdom often involves knowing when reflection has become repetition and when concern has become attachment. This realization creates an opportunity. Instead of asking how to carry more, a person can begin asking what no longer needs to be carried at all. Not every fear deserves continued investment. Not every frustration deserves another hour of attention. Not every comparison deserves consideration. Some thoughts remain active simply because they have become familiar. Familiarity creates attachment, and attachment creates weight. The mind grows lighter when it learns to distinguish between what is useful and what is merely habitual. The Stoics understood that freedom is not always gained by acquiring something new. Sometimes it is gained by releasing something unnecessary. The release does not happen through force. It happens through understanding. Once it becomes clear that a thought is adding weight without adding value, the relationship to that thought begins to change. The grip weakens, attention becomes less automatic, space begins to appear where constant mental occupation once existed. That space is more valuable than many people realize. Within it, clarity emerges, perspective returns. The mind no longer spends every moment managing emotional clutter. Energy that was previously tied up in old fears and imagined futures becomes available for the present. This does not eliminate every challenge. Life remains uncertain. Responsibilities remain real. Difficult emotions still appear. Yet they no longer arrive in a mind already overwhelmed by unnecessary burdens. As night deepens and the world becomes quiet, there is an opportunity hidden within that stillness. An opportunity to notice what is being carried and ask whether it still deserves a place there. Some things will. Certain lessons remain valuable. Certain responsibilities require attention. But much of what occupies mental space has long outlived its purpose. The mind does not become stronger by carrying everything. It becomes stronger by learning what to keep and what to release. And often the quality of tomorrow depends less on what is added before sleep and more on what is finally set down. The ability to release what no longer serves you is one of the most underestimated forms of strength. Many people assume strength is measured by how much they can endure, how much responsibility they can carry, or how long they can continue pushing forward despite discomfort. There is certainly value in resilience. There is value in persistence. Yet there is another kind of strength that receives far less attention. It is the strength required to let go, not because something is easy to release, but because holding on has become so familiar that it feels necessary. The mind often mistakes attachment for protection. It assumes that if something remains close, it remains under control. Yet some of the heaviest burdens people carry are burdens they no longer need. This pattern begins early and develops gradually. A painful experience leaves behind anger, and anger feels useful because it creates the impression of power. It feels like a shield against future harm. A disappointment creates fear, and fear feels useful because it creates the impression of preparation. It convinces the mind that constant vigilance will prevent future suffering. A mistake creates regret, and regret feels useful because it creates the impression of responsibility. It suggests that continuing to punish yourself somehow honors the lesson. Each attachment arrives wearing the mask of protection. Each one promises safety. Yet over time, many of them become sources of limitation rather than sources of strength. The mind rarely notices this transformation immediately. At first, the attachment seems justified. The anger feels deserved. The fear feels rational. The regret feels appropriate. Days pass, then months, sometimes years. What began as a temporary response slowly becomes a permanent companion. The original event fades into the background, yet the emotional attachment remains active. The person is no longer responding to reality as it exists now. They are responding to a pattern that was created long ago and never fully questioned. This is one reason certain emotions can feel so powerful. They are not drawing strength from the present moment alone. They are drawing strength from years of repetition. The Stoics paid careful attention to this tendency because they understood how easily people become prisoners of their own attachments. They recognized that freedom is not always limited by external circumstances. Often it is limited by what the mind refuses to release. As Epictetus observed, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A person may be physically free while remaining emotionally bound to a past grievance. They may have countless opportunities in front of them while remaining trapped by fear of failure. They may have learned from a mistake long ago, yet continue carrying regret as though the lesson is still unfinished. The burden remains because the attachment remains. What makes this especially difficult is that releasing something can feel irresponsible at first. The mind often argues that letting go means forgetting. It suggests that releasing anger means excusing what happened. It suggests that releasing fear means becoming careless. It suggests that releasing regret means refusing accountability. Yet these assumptions are rarely accurate. Letting go does not require forgetting. It does not require denying reality. It does not require pretending an experience never occurred. Instead, it involves separating the lesson from the suffering. The lesson can remain while the unnecessary burden is released. Consider anger. Anger can provide information. It can reveal a boundary that was crossed or a value that was violated. In that sense, it can serve a purpose. But once the lesson has been understood, continuing to carry the anger often serves no useful function. It simply occupies space. It demands attention. It influences perception. The person being harmed by that continued attachment is often the one carrying it. The same principle applies to fear. Fear can highlight a potential risk, but when it becomes a permanent state of mind, it begins limiting possibilities rather than protecting them. What once served as a warning becomes a cage. Regret follows a similar path. Healthy regret can encourage growth. It can inspire better choices in the future. Yet many people continue carrying regret long after growth has already occurred. They replay old decisions repeatedly, as though revisiting the memory will somehow change the outcome. The lesson was learned years ago, but the punishment continues. The mind confuses self-condemnation with responsibility. The Stoics challenged this confusion. They believed that wisdom comes from learning, not from endless self-punishment. Once the lesson has been absorbed, continuing to carry the weight adds nothing except unnecessary suffering. This understanding becomes particularly valuable during the quiet hours of the evening. As distractions fade and attention turns inward, it becomes easier to notice what is still being carried. Old frustrations, lingering fears, persistent regrets. These attachments often become most visible when the world grows quiet. Many people respond by becoming absorbed in them once again. The mind revisits familiar concerns because familiarity feels comfortable, even when it is painful. Yet these moments also offer another possibility. They offer a chance to ask whether the burden still serves a purpose. The answer is often revealing. Many of the thoughts that consume attention no longer contribute anything useful. They do not create solutions. They do not create understanding. They simply continue existing because they have become habits. And habits can feel permanent when they are repeated long enough. Yet habits are not destiny. The moment they are recognized, they become subject to examination. Once examined, they can be challenged. Once challenged, they begin losing their automatic influence. Freedom rarely arrives all at once. More often it appears gradually through small acts of release. One resentment questioned honestly, one fear viewed with greater perspective, one regret transformed into a lesson rather than a sentence. These moments may seem insignificant, yet they create profound change over time. The mind becomes lighter, attention becomes clearer, energy becomes available for things that truly matter. The circumstances of life may remain the same, but the experience of life begins to shift. And often that shift begins with a simple realization. Strength is not only measured by what you can carry, it is also measured by what you are wise enough to put down. The more carefully a person examines the burdens they carry, the more they begin noticing a common thread running through many of them. Beneath countless worries, frustrations, and restless thoughts lies a quiet struggle with control. The mind wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants assurance that the future will unfold according to plan and that difficult outcomes can be prevented through enough preparation, enough thinking, or enough effort. This desire is understandable. Uncertainty can feel uncomfortable. The unknown leaves room for possibilities that cannot be predicted or managed. Yet much of the tension people experience comes from attempting to control things that were never theirs to control in the first place. The Stoics returned to this idea repeatedly because they understood how central it is to inner stability. They recognized that human beings often spend extraordinary amounts of energy focused on things beyond their influence. Other people's opinions, future outcomes, external events, the behavior of strangers, the decisions of employers, the reactions of family members, the direction of markets, the arrival of opportunities, the avoidance of disappointments. These concerns occupy attention not because they can always be controlled, but because they feel important. The mind confuses importance with influence. Something can matter deeply while still remaining outside direct control. This confusion creates a difficult cycle. The more attention is invested in uncontrollable outcomes, the more powerless a person begins to feel. They monitor possibilities that have not occurred. They replay conversations that cannot be changed. They predict futures that may never arrive. Their thoughts become consumed by variables they cannot command. Meanwhile, the one area where genuine influence exists often receives the least attention. Their judgments, their choices, their responses, their actions in the present moment. These remain available, yet they are frequently overlooked because the mind is occupied elsewhere. Anxiety thrives within this imbalance. It grows strongest when attention becomes attached to outcomes rather than actions. A person worries endlessly about whether they will succeed, yet spends little time focusing on the effort available today. They worry about being liked while neglecting the character they can develop, regardless of approval. They worry about future setbacks while ignoring the resilience they can strengthen right now. The mind races toward distant possibilities, while neglecting the immediate reality standing directly in front of it. This creates exhaustion because the effort never reaches a conclusion. There is no finish line when attempting to control the uncontrollable. The Stoics approached life differently. They understood that peace does not come from mastering circumstances. It comes from mastering the relationship to circumstances. A storm may arrive, an opportunity may disappear. Someone may misunderstand your intentions. A carefully constructed plan may fail. None of these possibilities can be eliminated completely. Yet there remains something remarkably powerful within every situation. The ability to choose a response. This ability may seem small compared to the scale of external events, but it is far more influential than most people realize. Responses shape character. Responses shape habits. Responses shape the way experiences are interpreted and carried forward. This perspective becomes especially valuable at night, when many of the concerns that occupied the day begin resurfacing. The mind starts reviewing unfinished situations. It searches for certainty. It seeks answers that may not yet exist. Questions about tomorrow appear. Doubts about the future begin asking for attention. In these moments, it becomes tempting to continue wrestling with possibilities that cannot be resolved before morning. Yet, very little is gained through endless mental negotiation with uncertainty. The future rarely becomes clearer simply because it has been worried about more intensely. There is a certain relief that appears when a person pauses and separates what belongs to them from what does not. The outcome of tomorrow's meeting may not belong entirely to them. The opinions of others may not belong to them. The unpredictable events of the coming weeks may not belong to them. Their preparation belongs to them. Their effort belongs to them. Their integrity belongs to them. Their response belongs to them. This distinction creates clarity because it directs energy toward areas where energy can actually make a difference. Many people spend years attempting to manage shadows. They chase certainty where none exists. They seek complete control in a world that has never promised it. The result is constant tension because reality refuses to cooperate with these demands. Life remains unpredictable. People remain complex. Outcomes remain uncertain. No amount of worry changes these facts. The Stoics did not view this as a reason for despair. They viewed it as a reason for freedom. Once it becomes clear that complete control is impossible, attention can finally be redirected toward what is possible. This redirection changes the quality of thought. Instead of asking how to guarantee success, the mind begins focusing on preparation. Instead of asking how to eliminate uncertainty, it begins strengthening adaptability. Instead of demanding perfect outcomes, it begins cultivating steadiness, regardless of outcomes. These shifts may appear subtle, yet they transform the entire experience of life. Energy stops leaking into endless speculation and starts supporting meaningful action. As evening deepens and the mind prepares for rest, this understanding becomes even more important. Many people carry concerns into sleep that offer no opportunity for action. They replay possibilities. They rehearse fears. They negotiate with futures that have not yet arrived. The mind remains active because it believes more thinking will create more control. Yet control is not found through endless mental effort. It is found through clarity about where effort belongs. The quiet wisdom of the Stoics reminds us that not every problem needs to be solved before sleep. Not every uncertainty requires an answer tonight. Some things belong to tomorrow. Some belong to circumstances. Some belong to other people. What remains belongs to you. Your attitude, your judgment, your response, your willingness to meet whatever arrives with courage and perspective. These are the things that stay available no matter what happens, and when attention returns to them, the mind gradually stops wrestling with shadows and begins resting in something far more stable than certainty. The confidence that whatever comes, it can be met well. There is a subtle transformation that begins when the need to control everything starts fading. It rarely arrives as a dramatic breakthrough. More often, it appears gradually through a series of small realizations. A person notices that many of the things consuming their attention never truly belonged within their control. They notice how much energy has been spent worrying about outcomes that had not yet happened, trying to manage opinions that were never theirs to manage, and resisting circumstances that had already become reality. At first, this awareness can feel uncomfortable because it challenges a habit that has existed for years. Yet once the pattern becomes visible, something begins to shift. The mind stops carrying quite as much. The pressure eases. The constant tension begins loosening its grip. Life does not suddenly become easier when this happens. Problems do not disappear. Responsibilities remain. Difficult people still exist. Unexpected setbacks continue arriving without invitation. Uncertainty remains woven into the fabric of life exactly as it always has been. The difference is not found in the circumstances themselves. The difference is found in the relationship to those circumstances. When a person stops demanding that reality conform perfectly to their expectations, they stop creating unnecessary conflict with what already exists. The challenge remains, but the struggle against the challenge begins to fade. What remains is a clearer view of the situation as it actually is, rather than how it was hoped to be. The Stoics understood this distinction deeply. They recognized that much of human suffering comes from the gap between reality and expectation. People create detailed visions of how events should unfold. They decide how others should behave. They form assumptions about how quickly progress should occur. Then reality takes a different path. Frustration follows. Disappointment follows. Sometimes anger follows. Yet the event itself is often only part of the pain. The greater burden comes from the refusal to accept that the event has already happened. The mind continues arguing with reality long after reality has made its decision. This argument is exhausting because it can never be won. No amount of resistance changes the past. No amount of frustration forces life to follow a preferred script. A person may spend hours replaying an event, imagining alternative outcomes, and wishing circumstances had unfolded differently. Yet reality remains untouched by those efforts. The only thing being changed is the emotional state of the person carrying the resistance. This is why acceptance is so often misunderstood. Many people assume acceptance means approval. They assume it means liking what happened or surrendering to it passively. The Stoics meant something entirely different. Acceptance begins with seeing reality clearly enough to stop wasting energy denying it. Once reality is acknowledged, attention becomes available for something more useful. Instead of asking why something happened, the mind can begin asking how to respond. Instead of becoming trapped in resistance, it can move toward action. This shift is remarkably powerful because it redirects energy away from endless frustration and toward meaningful influence. The circumstance may remain unchanged, but the ability to engage with it becomes stronger. Clarity replaces emotional noise. Direction replaces confusion. The mind becomes less concerned with controlling events and more concerned with navigating them wisely. There is a surprising sense of relief hidden within this process, not because uncertainty disappears, but because the burden of managing uncertainty begins to fade. Many people spend years attempting to secure guarantees that life was never designed to provide. They want assurance that nothing will go wrong. They want certainty that their efforts will succeed. They want protection from disappointment. Yet life offers none of these promises. The attempt to obtain them often creates more anxiety than the uncertainty itself. When this pursuit is finally questioned, a great deal of mental space becomes available. That space allows a person to focus on what truly matters. Character matters. Judgment matters. The quality of decisions matters. Integrity matters. These are areas where effort can actually create meaningful change. The Stoics consistently directed attention toward these things because they understood their lasting value. External outcomes remain unpredictable, but the way a person conducts themselves remains available in every situation. This is where genuine strength begins to reveal itself. Not in controlling the world, but in controlling the response brought into the world. As evening arrives and the pace of the day begins slowing, this understanding becomes even more important. The quiet hours often expose where attention has been invested. If the day was spent fighting reality, the mind usually continues the fight after darkness falls. It replays disappointments, it negotiates with outcomes, it searches for certainty. Yet if attention has been directed toward what is actually available, a different experience emerges. The mind no longer feels compelled to solve every uncertainty before sleep. It no longer believes every unanswered question requires immediate resolution. There is room for patience. Patience itself is a form of strength that many people underestimate. It allows a person to live alongside uncertainty without becoming consumed by it. It allows them to acknowledge challenges without exaggerating them. It allows them to continue moving forward without demanding perfect conditions. This does not make life easier, but it makes life lighter. The emotional weight created by resistance begins disappearing. What remains is a steadier relationship with reality. Over time, this way of thinking changes more than individual moments. It changes the atmosphere of the mind itself. Challenges still arrive, but they no longer dominate every thought. Disappointments still occur, but they no longer define entire days. Uncertainty still exists, but it no longer controls attention. The person becomes less reactive and more deliberate, less attached and more present, less focused on forcing life into a particular shape and more focused on meeting life with clarity. This is one of the quiet lessons hidden within Stoic philosophy. Strength is not found in controlling everything. Strength is found in knowing what deserves control and what deserves acceptance. One creates endless struggle. The other creates freedom. And when that freedom begins taking root, the mind discovers something it has often been searching for all along. Not a perfect life, but a lighter way of living it. Character reveals itself most clearly when life becomes difficult. It is easy to feel patient when nothing is testing your patience. It is easy to feel confident when everything is going according to plan. It is easy to feel calm when circumstances are comfortable and predictable. Yet those moments tell us very little about who we are. The real measure of a person often appears when expectations are interrupted, when plans begin to unravel, or when life refuses to cooperate. These are the moments most people try to avoid, yet the Stoics viewed them differently. They saw them as opportunities to observe what had truly been developed within, not what had been claimed, not what had been imagined, what had actually been built through repeated choices and daily practice. This perspective changes the way challenges are interpreted. Instead of viewing every obstacle as evidence that something has gone wrong, it becomes possible to see difficulty as a form of instruction. That does not mean pain suddenly becomes enjoyable or that setbacks become pleasant experiences. The discomfort remains real, the disappointment remains real, yet the meaning attached to those experiences begins to change. Rather than asking why this is happening, attention gradually shifts toward what can be learned from it. This simple shift creates a very different relationship with adversity. The obstacle stops being viewed solely as an interruption and begins revealing itself as a teacher. The Stoics understood that character is not formed during moments of ease. It is revealed and strengthened during moments of resistance. A person may believe they possess patience until they encounter frustration. They may believe they possess courage until they face uncertainty. They may believe they possess discipline until comfort offers an easier alternative. Life has a way of presenting situations that expose the gap between what we think we are and what we consistently practice. Far from being a problem, the Stoics saw this as a gift. Awareness of that gap creates the possibility of growth. Without seeing where improvement is needed, improvement remains impossible. Consider how differently a setback feels when viewed through this lens. Most people immediately focus on what was lost. The opportunity disappeared, the plan failed, the effort did not produce the desired outcome. These reactions are natural, yet there is often another layer hidden beneath the surface. The experience is also revealing something about the person living through it. How do they respond when events move against them? How do they speak to themselves when things do not go as expected? Do they become consumed by frustration, or do they remain capable of clear thinking? The answers to these questions often matter more than the setback itself, because they influence every challenge that follows. This is one reason the Stoics placed such importance on inner development. External circumstances constantly change. Success can disappear, comfort can disappear, stability can disappear. A person who depends entirely on favorable conditions will find themselves vulnerable whenever those conditions change. Character offers something more reliable. Patience remains useful during success and failure. Courage remains useful during certainty and uncertainty. Discipline remains useful whether motivation is present or absent. Wisdom remains valuable regardless of external circumstances. These qualities travel with a person through every season of life. The evening hours provide a unique opportunity to reflect on this reality. As the day begins to settle, it becomes easier to look back and notice the moments that tested you. Perhaps there was a frustration that challenged your patience. Perhaps there was uncertainty that challenged your confidence. Perhaps there was a temptation that challenged your discipline. These moments are often uncomfortable while they are happening, yet they contain valuable information. They reveal areas that are becoming stronger and areas that still require attention. They show where progress has been made and where growth remains possible. What makes this practice so powerful is that it transforms ordinary experiences into opportunities for development. A delayed plan becomes an opportunity to practice patience. A criticism becomes an opportunity to practice perspective. A disappointment becomes an opportunity to practice resilience. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Life itself becomes a training ground. The circumstances may not have been chosen, but the response remains available. This is where the Stoics focused their attention, because they understood that lasting strength comes from what is developed internally rather than what is provided externally. Over time, this way of viewing challenges creates a noticeable change. Difficulties no longer feel completely meaningless. They still bring discomfort, but they also bring insight. A person begins seeing lessons where they once saw only obstacles. They begin recognizing opportunities for growth hidden within situations they previously resisted. The challenge remains difficult, yet it becomes useful. This usefulness does not remove the pain, but it prevents the pain from being wasted. There is something deeply empowering about recognizing that every challenge contains two experiences. There is the external event, which may or may not be within your control. Then there is the internal response, which always remains available to shape. Most people become completely absorbed in the first experience and overlook the second. The Stoics reversed this focus. They understood that while circumstances influence life, character determines how those circumstances are met. Two people can face similar hardships and emerge in entirely different ways because their responses differ. The event matters, but the response matters more. As night approaches and reflection becomes possible, this understanding begins to settle more deeply into awareness. The goal is no longer to create a life without obstacles. Such a life does not exist. The goal becomes something more meaningful. It becomes the gradual development of qualities that allow a person to meet obstacles well. Every difficulty contributes something. Every setback reveals something. Every challenge presents an opportunity to strengthen a part of yourself that comfort could never develop. Life will continue presenting tests. That much is certain. The more important question is not what those tests will look like. It is who they are helping you become. And in that realization, even the hardest experiences begin carrying a different kind of value, one that extends far beyond the moment itself and quietly shapes the person you become tomorrow. The final moments before sleep are often treated as insignificant. For many people, they are simply the closing minutes of another day, a brief transition between activity and rest. Yet those quiet moments carry far more influence than they appear to. As the noise of the day begins to fade and attention turns inward, the mind enters a different state. The constant demands of the external world lose some of their urgency. Responsibilities pause, conversations end, distractions become less powerful. What remains is often a clearer view of whatever has been occupying attention most consistently. The thoughts present during these moments are rarely random. They are often reflections of what has been rehearsed throughout the day. This is why the final thoughts before sleep deserve careful consideration. The mind does not simply switch off when consciousness begins to fade. Long after the body has relaxed, mental processes continue. Memories are organized, experiences are reviewed, patterns are reinforced. Modern psychology has explored many aspects of this process, but the Stoics understood its practical significance long before scientific language existed to describe it. They recognized that repeated thoughts shape perception, influence behavior, and gradually become part of a person's character. What receives attention repeatedly tends to leave a lasting impression. Consider how naturally this process unfolds in everyday life. A person who spends weeks dwelling on resentment often becomes more sensitive to reasons for further resentment. Small frustrations begin appearing larger. Neutral situations are interpreted more negatively. The mind becomes skilled at noticing evidence that supports the emotional pattern it has been practicing. The same principle applies to fear. A person who repeatedly focuses on uncertainty, danger, and imagined problems often becomes increasingly prepared to find reasons for concern. Attention acts like a lens. Whatever it focuses on consistently becomes easier to notice. This tendency is neither good nor bad on its own. It is simply part of how the mind operates. The challenge is that many people remain unaware of what they are reinforcing. They assume their thoughts are temporary visitors when, in reality, repeated thoughts often become long-term influences. The subconscious mind does not evaluate every idea carefully before accepting it. It learns through repetition. What appears again and again begins to feel familiar. What feels familiar begins influencing expectations, emotions, and reactions. This happens quietly, often without conscious awareness. The evening hours are especially important because they often reveal which patterns have been receiving the most attention. If frustration has dominated the day, frustration is likely to appear before sleep. If gratitude has been practiced, gratitude often appears as well. The mind tends to return to whatever has been fed most consistently. This does not mean every thought before bed determines the future. Human beings are far more complex than that. Yet repeated mental habits create momentum. They establish directions. Over time, those directions become increasingly influential. The Stoics understood the power of this momentum. They believed that character develops through repeated actions and repeated thoughts. Every day contributes something to the person you are becoming. Every reaction strengthens certain tendencies. Every habit reinforces particular ways of seeing the world. Because of this, they paid close attention to what occupied their minds, especially during moments of reflection. They understood that growth rarely happens through isolated breakthroughs. It happens through consistent reinforcement of useful perspectives and deliberate examination of harmful ones. This idea becomes particularly meaningful when considering how many people approach the end of their day. Some spend their final waking moments revisiting arguments that have already ended. Others rehearse worries about situations they cannot currently influence. Some compare themselves endlessly to others, creating dissatisfaction where none previously existed. None of these habits remain confined to a single evening. Repetition gives them strength. Night after night, they become more familiar. Familiarity eventually creates patterns, and patterns influence the way future experiences are interpreted. Yet the opposite process is equally true. A person who consistently directs attention toward gratitude begins noticing more reasons to be grateful. A person who reflects on lessons rather than failures begins developing greater wisdom from experience. A person who focuses on perspective instead of panic gradually becomes more resilient when challenges appear. These changes rarely happen overnight. They emerge slowly, almost invisibly, through countless small moments of reinforcement. The mind becomes shaped by what it repeatedly encounters. This is one reason reflection before sleep can be so valuable. It provides an opportunity to choose, at least to some extent, what receives attention during those final moments of the day. Instead of allowing every frustration to dominate awareness, a person can pause and consider what deserves to be carried forward. Instead of strengthening old resentments, they can focus on understanding. Instead of feeding fear, they can return attention to what remains within their influence. These choices may seem minor, yet repeated consistently, they begin shaping the atmosphere of the mind itself. The subconscious does not engage in lengthy debates about what should matter. It learns from repetition. It notices where attention goes. It absorbs what is practiced. This is why the quality of mental input matters so much. The mind becomes increasingly familiar with whatever it encounters most often. Whether that familiarity leads toward greater peace or greater unrest depends largely on what is being reinforced day after day. As the evening grows quiet and the day prepares to give way to rest, there is a unique opportunity hidden within those final moments. Not an opportunity for perfection, and not an opportunity to control every thought, but an opportunity to become more intentional. To notice what is being planted before sleep, to recognize which patterns are being strengthened, to understand that every repeated thought contributes something to the person who will wake up tomorrow. The seeds placed in the mind do not always grow immediately, yet given enough time, enough repetition, and enough attention, they shape perception, influence behavior, and quietly become part of the life that unfolds. That is why those final thoughts matter. They are rarely as small as they seem. Most people think of identity as something permanent. They describe themselves using fixed labels and long-established beliefs. They say they are confident or insecure, disciplined or impulsive, optimistic or pessimistic, as though these qualities exist independently of their daily actions. Yet a closer look reveals something different. Identity is not simply something a person possesses. It is something a person continuously builds. Every day contributes to it. Every choice influences it. Every habit strengthens a particular version of who someone becomes. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not view character as a finished product. They viewed it as an ongoing process shaped by repeated decisions, repeated thoughts, and repeated responses to life. This understanding changes the way ordinary moments are perceived. A single thought may seem insignificant. A single reaction may appear too small to matter. One evening of reflection may not feel important enough to influence the future. Yet identity is rarely shaped by dramatic moments alone. More often, it is shaped through accumulation. Small actions repeated consistently become habits. Habits repeated consistently become tendencies. Tendencies repeated consistently become character. The process is gradual, often so gradual that it escapes attention entirely, yet it never stops. Whether a person is aware of it or not, they are constantly becoming something. This is why the final hours of the day deserve such careful consideration. By the time evening arrives, countless choices have already been made. Thoughts have been entertained. Emotions have been reinforced. Reactions have been repeated. As the mind begins settling, there is an opportunity to observe what has been strengthened, What received attention today? What patterns were reinforced? What version of yourself was given the most support? These questions matter because every repeated mental habit contributes to future behavior. The person who wakes up tomorrow is influenced by what was practiced today. Many people underestimate the power of repetition because they are searching for immediate transformation. They want dramatic change. They want sudden breakthroughs. They want visible results. Yet the most lasting forms of growth rarely happen that way. A person becomes calmer by practicing calmness repeatedly. They become more disciplined by choosing discipline repeatedly. They become wiser by reflecting repeatedly. No single moment creates the transformation. The transformation emerges from the accumulation of moments. The Stoics recognized this and focused their attention on daily practice rather than dramatic outcomes. Consider how easily the opposite process can occur. A person repeatedly tells themselves they are incapable. They replay old failures. They focus on weaknesses. They reinforce self-doubt day after day. Eventually, these thoughts begin feeling true, not because they accurately describe reality, but because they have been repeated so often. The mind becomes familiar with them. Familiarity creates acceptance. Acceptance influences behavior. Behavior produces results that appear to confirm the original belief. A cycle develops. Identity begins reflecting what has been practiced. Yet this same process can work in a completely different direction. A person who consistently reflects on lessons rather than failures begins developing a different relationship with setbacks. A person who repeatedly returns attention to what they can control begins developing greater stability during uncertainty. A person who consistently chooses patience over impulsiveness gradually becomes more patient. None of these changes happen overnight. They emerge through repetition. They emerge because the mind learns from what it encounters most often. The Stoics believed that awareness was essential because awareness interrupts automatic patterns. Without awareness, people drift. They repeat habits without questioning them. They reinforce beliefs without examining them. They become versions of themselves created largely by unconscious repetition. Awareness changes this process. The moment a pattern becomes visible, a choice appears. The person is no longer merely reacting. They are participating. They are deciding what deserves reinforcement and what deserves reconsideration. This is one reason evening reflection can be so powerful. It creates a pause between one day and the next. Within that pause exists an opportunity to examine direction, not with harsh judgment, not with unrealistic expectations, simply with honesty. As Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." What kind of person were your actions supporting today? What habits were strengthened? What qualities received attention? Every answer provides valuable information because every answer points toward a future version of yourself that is already beginning to take shape. There is something empowering about realizing that identity is not fixed. It means the past does not have complete authority over the future. Old habits may exist, but they do not have to remain permanent. Old fears may still appear, but they do not have to define what comes next. Old patterns may have influenced previous decisions, yet new patterns can be cultivated through consistent effort. Change becomes possible the moment identity is understood as something being built rather than something already completed. As night deepens and the mind prepares for rest, this realization becomes increasingly meaningful. The thoughts carried into sleep are not merely reflections of who you are. They are also contributors to who you are becoming. Every repeated belief leaves an impression. Every repeated perspective strengthens a direction. Every repeated act of awareness supports a particular form of growth. The mind continues learning even when the process feels invisible. This is why the person you become is rarely created through a single decision. It is created through thousands of decisions, many of them so small they barely seem important at the time. One thought, one reflection, one response, one moment of awareness. Repeated often enough, these moments begin shaping character itself, and character, more than circumstance, becomes the foundation upon which the rest of life is built. The future is influenced not only by what happens tomorrow, but by what is quietly being reinforced tonight. Every thought becomes a vote. Every reflection becomes a direction. Every evening becomes another opportunity to participate consciously in the ongoing process of becoming. There is a reason lasting change often goes unnoticed while it is happening. People are naturally drawn to dramatic stories. They admire sudden transformations, overnight success, and moments that appear to alter everything at once. The mind enjoys visible results because they are easy to recognize and easy to celebrate. Yet most meaningful growth follows a very different path. It unfolds quietly. It develops beneath the surface. It rarely announces its arrival. In fact, some of the most important changes in a person's life are only recognized long after they have already taken place. Looking back, the difference becomes obvious. Living through it, the progress often feels almost invisible. The Stoics understood this reality because they focused less on outcomes and more on practice. They knew that character is not shaped by occasional moments of inspiration. It is shaped by repeated actions. A person does not become wise because they encountered one profound idea. They become wiser because they returned to that idea repeatedly and allowed it to influence the way they lived. They do not become patient because they succeeded once. They become patient because they practiced patience again and again, especially during moments when impatience would have been easier. Transformation occurs through repetition. The changes may appear small in isolation, yet their cumulative effect is extraordinary. This can be difficult to appreciate in a culture that constantly emphasizes dramatic results. Many people begin a process of growth expecting immediate evidence that something significant is happening. They want to feel different right away. They want visible proof that their efforts are working. When that proof fails to appear quickly, discouragement often follows. They assume nothing is changing because the changes are not dramatic enough to notice. Yet growth rarely works this way. Consider how a tree develops. Day by day, the growth is almost impossible to see. Weeks pass and the changes seem minor. Months pass and the progress becomes clearer. Years pass and the difference is undeniable. The process was happening the entire time, even when it appeared invisible. The mind develops in a similar manner. One calmer response may not seem important. One moment of restraint may feel insignificant. One evening spent choosing reflection instead of rumination may not appear powerful enough to influence the future. Yet these moments are not isolated events. They become patterns. Patterns become habits. Habits become tendencies. Over time, those tendencies begin shaping perception itself. The person who consistently practices a wiser response gradually becomes someone for whom that response feels natural. The effort that once required conscious attention becomes part of their character. This is why seemingly small decisions deserve more respect than they often receive. A conscious choice not to follow an anxious thought may last only a few seconds, yet it weakens an old pattern and strengthens a new one. A decision to respond with patience rather than irritation may appear minor, yet it contributes to the development of a calmer mind. A choice to focus on understanding rather than resentment may seem insignificant in the moment, yet repeated often enough, it changes the way future situations are interpreted. Every small decision participates in shaping the person who will exist tomorrow. The Stoics viewed life as a continuous opportunity for this kind of practice. They did not separate ordinary moments from meaningful ones. Every interaction contained the possibility of growth. Every frustration contained an opportunity to strengthen perspective. Every challenge contained an opportunity to refine judgment. They understood that the mind is constantly being trained. The only question is whether that training is happening consciously or unconsciously. Without awareness, habits form automatically. With awareness, habits can be guided deliberately. This becomes especially important during the quiet moments before sleep. As the day comes to an end, the mind naturally reviews experiences, emotions, and impressions. These moments create an opportunity to notice subtle progress that might otherwise go unseen. Perhaps there was a situation that would have triggered anger in the past, yet the reaction was calmer. Perhaps there was uncertainty, yet it did not produce the same level of anxiety it once did. Perhaps an old habit appeared, but it was recognized more quickly than before. These changes may seem small, yet they are evidence that something important is happening beneath the surface. One of the greatest obstacles to growth is the tendency to overlook gradual improvement. People often focus so intensely on how far they still have to go that they fail to recognize how far they have already come. The mind becomes preoccupied with the destination and ignores the progress occurring along the way. The Stoics encouraged a different perspective. They understood that meaningful development is measured not by perfection, but by direction. The question is not whether every weakness has disappeared. The question is whether movement is occurring in a wiser direction than before. Direction matters because it compounds over time. A small adjustment repeated consistently produces results that seem disproportionate to the effort involved. One degree of change may appear insignificant at first, yet over months and years, it leads to an entirely different destination. This principle applies to thought patterns, emotional habits, and daily choices. The architecture of the mind is not transformed through a single act. It is transformed through repeated acts that gradually reinforce a different way of seeing, thinking, and responding. As night settles in and another day reaches its conclusion, there is comfort in recognizing that transformation does not require dramatic breakthroughs. It does not demand perfection. It asks only for consistency. One thoughtful reflection, one wiser response, one moment of awareness repeated often enough to become a habit. The changes may be quiet, they may be easy to overlook, yet they are powerful precisely because they endure. Day after day, they continue shaping the mind from within. And over time, those small moments that once seemed insignificant become the foundation of a completely different way of living. There is a strange tendency in human nature to look far away for answers that may already be close at hand. People often assume that meaningful change must come from something dramatic, a life-changing revelation, a perfect strategy, a powerful breakthrough that suddenly transforms everything at once. Because of this, they spend years searching for extraordinary solutions while overlooking the quiet opportunities that appear every single day. The mind is naturally attracted to what seems impressive. It often ignores what seems familiar. Yet some of the most influential forces in life are hidden inside ordinary moments precisely because they are repeated so often that they stop attracting attention. The Stoics understood this better than most. They did not build their philosophy around rare events or dramatic experiences. They focused on daily practice. They focused on habits. They focused on the small choices that gradually shape character over time. Their wisdom was not rooted in the belief that greatness comes from occasional acts of brilliance. It was rooted in the understanding that a meaningful life is often constructed through consistent attention to ordinary moments. What a person repeatedly thinks, repeatedly values, and repeatedly practices eventually becomes who they are. This perspective feels almost counterintuitive in a world that celebrates extremes. People are constantly encouraged to search for the next breakthrough, the next secret, the next technique that promises rapid transformation. Yet the search itself can become a distraction. It creates the illusion that growth exists somewhere else, hidden behind another book, another method, or another future achievement. Meanwhile, the opportunities already present continue passing by unnoticed. The person waits for a significant moment while overlooking the significance hidden within ordinary ones. Consider how much of life is shaped by repetition rather than intensity. Relationships are built through repeated interactions. Trust develops through repeated actions. Skills improve through repeated practice. Character grows through repeated choices. Rarely does a single moment create lasting change by itself. More often, lasting change emerges through countless small moments that seem unimportant while they are happening. The power exists not in any individual moment, but in the accumulation of many moments moving in the same direction. This is one reason the hours before sleep deserve so much attention. On the surface, they appear ordinary. They arrive every day. There is nothing dramatic about them, no audience, no recognition, no visible achievement. Yet beneath that ordinary appearance lies an opportunity that many people overlook. During these quiet moments, the mind becomes less occupied by external demands. The constant competition for attention begins to fade. What remains is a rare opportunity to influence the direction of thought with greater awareness than is often possible during the busier parts of the day. Most people pass through these moments automatically. They carry the same concerns into the evening that they carried throughout the afternoon. The same frustrations continue receiving attention. The same fears continue repeating themselves. The same patterns continue operating without examination. Night after night, the process repeats. Because it feels ordinary, its influence remains invisible. Yet repetition is precisely what gives these moments their power. What happens occasionally may leave an impression. What happens consistently begins shaping perception itself. The Stoics recognized that every repeated experience leaves a mark. Every recurring thought strengthens a pathway. Every habit reinforces a direction. This is why they treated reflection as a practice rather than an occasional activity. They understood that awareness develops through repetition just as surely as any other skill. A single moment of reflection is valuable. Hundreds of moments accumulated over time become transformative. The mind gradually becomes more familiar with observation, more capable of perspective, and less dependent on automatic reaction. What makes this opportunity especially remarkable is its accessibility. Many forms of growth require resources, education, circumstances, or opportunities that are not equally available to everyone. The moments before sleep belong to nearly everyone. They arrive without invitation and without cost. No special conditions are required. No extraordinary talent is necessary. The opportunity exists simply because another day is ending. Yet, despite being so accessible, it is often neglected. Familiarity creates a kind of blindness. People overlook what is always available because it lacks novelty. There is an irony in this. The search for profound change often leads people away from the very practices capable of creating it. They seek dramatic solutions while ignoring consistent ones. They look for complexity while overlooking simplicity. They search for distant answers while neglecting nearby opportunities. Yet life repeatedly demonstrates that small actions performed consistently often outperform grand intentions left unpracticed. The extraordinary is frequently hidden inside the ordinary, waiting for someone to recognize its value. As evening settles and another day begins drawing to a close, there is something deeply reassuring about this realization. Growth does not always require a perfect plan. It does not require constant motivation. It does not depend on dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it begins with a few moments of honest reflection before sleep, a willingness to observe rather than react, a willingness to learn rather than judge, a willingness to guide attention toward what matters instead of whatever happens to demand attention most loudly. Over time, these simple practices begin producing effects that seem far greater than their size would suggest. Perspective becomes steadier. Reactions become more deliberate. Old patterns lose some of their influence. New patterns gain strength. The changes may be subtle at first, almost invisible, yet they continue accumulating beneath the surface, day after day, night after night. The ordinary moments continue doing their quiet work. Perhaps that is why they matter so much. They do not announce themselves. They do not appear extraordinary. They simply arrive, offering the same opportunity again and again, an opportunity to pay attention, an opportunity to reflect, an opportunity to shape the direction of thought before another day begins. Few opportunities are more available. Few require less. And few possess the ability to influence the course of a life so quietly, so consistently, and so profoundly over time. One of the most significant changes a person can experience is also one of the quietest. It does not arrive with a dramatic announcement. It does not feel like a sudden transformation that divides life into a clear before and after. Instead, it develops gradually through repeated moments of awareness. At first, the change is almost difficult to notice. Life still presents challenges. People still say things that trigger frustration. Unexpected problems still appear. Disappointments still arrive without warning. Yet something begins happening beneath the surface. The automatic reaction that once seemed unavoidable starts losing its grip. The distance between an event and a response becomes slightly larger. What was once immediate becomes observable. What was once unconscious becomes visible. Most people spend much of their lives reacting. A criticism appears and irritation follows automatically. An inconvenience occurs and frustration takes over. An uncertain situation develops, and anxiety immediately begins constructing stories about what might happen next. These reactions often feel natural because they have been practiced for years. The mind learns patterns through repetition, and eventually those patterns begin operating without permission. A person may believe they are making conscious decisions when, in reality, they are simply repeating familiar responses. The event changes, but the reaction remains the same. Different circumstances trigger the same habits. Different challenges produce the same emotional movements. The pattern continues because it is rarely questioned. The Stoics understood that genuine freedom begins when this process becomes visible. Freedom was never merely about external circumstances. It was not dependent on comfort, status, wealth, or the absence of difficulty. A person could possess all of those things and still remain controlled by impulses they did not understand. At the same time, someone facing tremendous hardship could possess remarkable inner freedom if they had learned how to govern their responses. This is why the Stoics focused so much attention on awareness. Before a reaction can be guided, it must first be seen. This awareness creates something incredibly valuable. It creates a pause. That pause may last only a moment, yet its influence can be profound. Within that moment, the mind gains the opportunity to choose rather than simply react. Anger may appear, but anger no longer dictates the next action automatically. Fear may arise, but fear is no longer treated as an unquestionable authority. Disappointment may be present, yet disappointment does not immediately determine perspective. The emotion remains real. The challenge remains real. What changes is the relationship to them. This is where many people discover a level of strength they did not realize they possessed. They had spent years believing their emotions controlled them. They assumed certain reactions were inevitable. They thought their habits defined them. Then awareness begins creating space, and within that space they recognize another possibility. They can observe an emotion without obeying it. They can acknowledge a thought without believing it completely. They can experience discomfort without becoming consumed by it. This realization changes everything because it reveals that awareness itself contains power. The process develops slowly. One evening of reflection will not completely transform a lifetime of habits. The Stoics never promised instant mastery. They understood that the mind changes through consistent practice. Every moment of observation strengthens the ability to observe again. Every pause before reacting strengthens the ability to pause in the future. Over time, what once required significant effort begins feeling more natural. The space between stimulus and response becomes more familiar. Reactions lose some of their urgency. Perspective becomes easier to access. As this ability grows, life begins feeling different in subtle but meaningful ways. External circumstances may remain largely unchanged, yet internal experience shifts noticeably. A difficult conversation no longer ruins an entire day. A setback no longer becomes evidence that everything is falling apart. An uncertain future no longer demands endless mental rehearsal. Challenges still matter, but they no longer dominate awareness in the same way. The mind becomes less reactive and more deliberate. Attention becomes less scattered and more intentional. This is one reason reflection before sleep can be so powerful. The quiet hours provide an opportunity to strengthen this practice daily. Looking back on the day reveals where automatic reactions appeared and where awareness managed to create space. It becomes easier to notice patterns, easier to recognize emotional habits, easier to understand which situations still trigger unconscious responses. Each observation adds another layer of understanding. Each layer of understanding creates another opportunity for choice. The Stoics believed that wisdom emerges through this process, not because wisdom means knowing everything, but because wisdom means responding to life with greater clarity. A person becomes wiser when they stop being pushed around by every passing impulse. They become wiser when they learn to separate appearance from reality, emotion from judgment, reaction from choice. This does not remove emotion from life. It simply places emotion in its proper role. Feelings provide information, but they no longer become unquestioned commands. What makes this transformation remarkable is how quietly it unfolds. There is rarely a moment when a person suddenly declares complete mastery over themselves. Instead, they notice that situations affecting them deeply in the past no longer hold the same power. They notice greater patience where there was once frustration, greater calm where there was once anxiety, greater understanding where there was once impulsiveness. The changes appear gradually, yet their impact reaches every area of life. As another day comes to an end and the mind begins preparing for rest, there is value in remembering that every moment of awareness matters, every pause matters, every conscious response matters. These small moments accumulate. They strengthen the ability to choose rather than react. They strengthen the ability to remain steady when circumstances become difficult. Most importantly, they strengthen the ability to become an active participant in shaping character rather than a passive observer of old habits. The Stoics saw this as one of the highest forms of strength because it places the most important part of life back where it belongs, within the reach of conscious choice. There comes a point when the entire pursuit begins to look different. In the beginning, many people approach growth as though it were a destination. They imagine a future version of themselves who no longer struggles, no longer doubts, no longer feels frustrated, distracted, uncertain, or affected by life's challenges. They picture a state of complete mastery where every emotion is perfectly regulated and every decision is effortlessly wise. It is an appealing image because it promises relief from the difficulties of being human. Yet over time, a deeper understanding begins to emerge. The goal was never perfection. Perfection is a moving target that constantly shifts further away the closer it seems. The real goal was always awareness, not becoming flawless, but becoming conscious of how you think, how you respond, and how you choose to engage with the life unfolding around you. This realization changes the entire journey. Instead of measuring progress by the absence of struggle, progress is measured by the presence of awareness. Difficult emotions still appear, but they are recognized more quickly. Unhelpful thoughts still arise, but they are no longer accepted automatically. Challenges still arrive, but they are met with greater clarity. The person has not become perfect. They have become present. And presence changes everything because it allows life to be experienced directly rather than through layers of unconscious habit. For many years, people drift through their lives without realizing how much of their experience is being shaped by patterns they never consciously chose. Thoughts appear and are immediately believed. Emotions arise and are immediately obeyed. Reactions occur so quickly that they feel inevitable. Days blend together. Weeks pass. Years pass. Life continues moving forward, yet much of it is lived on automatic pilot. The Stoics warned against this kind of unconscious living because they understood how easily a person can surrender their freedom without realizing it. Not to external circumstances, but to internal habits that remain unexamined. Awareness interrupts that drift. It creates a moment of recognition. A person begins noticing the stories they tell themselves. They begin recognizing the assumptions shaping their decisions. They start seeing how certain fears influence their choices and how certain attachments influence their reactions. None of these discoveries make them perfect. They make them conscious. And consciousness creates possibility. The moment a pattern becomes visible, it can be questioned. The moment it is questioned, it can begin losing its automatic power. This is why the quiet moments before sleep matter so much. They provide an opportunity to step outside the momentum of the day and observe it clearly. During those moments, there is no need to impress anyone, no need to perform, no need to chase the next achievement. There is only the opportunity to notice what occupied attention, to notice what influenced decisions, to notice what was strengthened and what was weakened. These observations may seem small, yet they gradually reshape the relationship a person has with themselves. The Stoics believed that the mind should not be left entirely to chance. Just as a garden requires attention if it is to flourish, the inner world requires guidance if it is to develop wisely. Without awareness, weeds grow naturally. Resentment grows, fear grows, impulsiveness grows. The mind adopts whatever patterns are repeated most often. With awareness, however, a person begins participating in that process intentionally. They become less passive, less reactive, less likely to be carried wherever their latest emotion happens to lead. This participation is one of the greatest forms of responsibility. Not responsibility in the sense of blame, but responsibility in the sense of stewardship. The realization that your inner world belongs to you. Your attention belongs to you. Your judgments belong to you. Your responses belong to you. External events may influence these things, but they do not own them. Every evening becomes a reminder of this truth. The day may have contained challenges, disappointments, and unexpected difficulties, yet there remains an opportunity to choose what will be carried forward and what will be left behind. Over time, these choices begin accumulating. The effects are not always visible immediately. In fact, they often go unnoticed for long periods. Then, one day, something happens. A situation that would once have caused panic creates only concern. A criticism that would once have ruined an evening loses its ability to linger. A setback that would once have been interpreted as failure becomes a lesson instead. The circumstances may look similar, yet the response is different. Not because life changed, but because the person changed. Quietly, gradually, consistently. This is where the true significance of those nightly moments becomes clear. They are not simply endings, they are beginnings. Each evening offers another opportunity to reinforce a particular direction. Every reflection influences future perception. Every thought given repeated attention contributes to the architecture of the mind. Every act of awareness strengthens the ability to live deliberately rather than automatically. The process is subtle, yet its influence reaches far beyond a single night. And so the cycle continues. Night arrives. Reflection becomes possible. Attention is directed. Lessons are gathered. Certain burdens are released. Certain values are strengthened. Then morning comes, carrying the results of what was cultivated before sleep. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently. The mind wakes influenced by what it has repeatedly practiced. Perspective wakes with it. Habits wake with it. Character wakes with it. Eventually, it becomes clear that life is shaped not only by the events that happen to you, but by the way you meet those events day after day. The goal was never to eliminate every struggle. The goal was to become conscious enough to navigate those struggles wisely, to stop drifting and start participating, to stop surrendering attention to every passing thought and begin directing it with intention. Every night becomes an invitation to remember that truth, and every morning becomes evidence that what you cultivate within yourself never stays hidden for long. It always finds its way into the life you live. The quality of a life is often decided in moments no one else ever sees. A thought released instead of carried, a fear questioned instead of obeyed, a quiet decision to return your attention to what truly matters. Night after night, these small choices shape character, and character shapes destiny. Long before the world notices a change, the transformation has already begun within. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. If this message resonated with you, don't let the journey end here. Choose one of the videos on your screen and continue strengthening the mindset, wisdom, and inner discipline that make a calmer, stronger, and more meaningful life possible. Until next time, rest well, think deeply, and keep moving forward with purpose.